Episode 526 with Dr. Gerald Pollack is going to be brought to you by the Big Berkey water filter. If you guys are unfamiliar with the Berkey, it's an awesome water filtration device. It is actually the #1 water filtration device tested by Natural News, Mike Adams over at Natural News in his laboratory, showing that it got rid of 86.6% of aluminum, 100% of copper, 100% of arsenic, 98.6% of cesium, 100% of strontium, 100% cadmium, 99.8% mercury, 100% lead, 100% uranium. We love our Berkey water filter. It travels well. It works by gravity, so you don't need to have electricity. It's an incredible machine, and it just feels good to have water that we can give to everyone in our family that's nice and clean. So consider getting the Big Berkey water filter that's available in our store. And we're also brought to you by the Relax Far Infrared Sauna. Now, this sauna is incredible for helping to detoxify your body of chemicals, poisons, and toxins that we're exposed to on a daily basis that take up residence in our fat cells. And it's an incredible way to boost the immune system, to increase heat shock proteins, to increase longevity, lower inflammation, increase circulation. The sauna that we have, the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, is just incredible. It heats up right away, and you sweat usually within about 5 or 10 minutes. And you don't have to knock down a wall. It's transferable. You can lend it to a friend. It's low EMF. It's just by far my most favorite health tool that I have. So if you guys are interested in the Berkey or the Relax Far Infrared Sauna, check them out in our store, or you can go to extremehealthradio.com/526. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We are recording this on Memorial Day 2017. Thank you all for listening. We hope you guys, by the time you're listening to this, Memorial Day will be over, but I hope you had a good Memorial Day if you're living in the United States. So thank you so much for joining us. Let me get this correct here. This is episode 526. Can you believe that? 526 shows we've done, and they're all free. They're all available. You can download them in our archives. You can go on iTunes and listen to all the shows. So if you would like to check out the show notes or any of the information that we talk about today, you can go to extremehealthradio.com/526. And today we're going to be talking with Dr. Gerald Pollack. We're going to be talking about water. We've had so many people write in about water and asking us to interview him. So we got him on the line, and he was gracious enough to join us on this Memorial Day. Let me just give you a quick rundown on the upcoming shows we have. We're going to be doing another show today with Susan Chan. We're going to be talking about Lyme disease. It's interesting. We've never done a show on Lyme disease on 520 plus shows, and then we have 2 shows on Lyme disease almost back to back. We'll be talking with Patrick Durkin pretty soon next week about water, so that'll be interesting as well. William Bankston will be next week, and he's been doing energy healing, and he's a PhD. He's a researcher, educator, author in the field of energy healing. So we'll be talking to him next week. His website's bankstonresearch.com. So we've got a lot of cool stuff coming up. If you guys want to subscribe to the show, you can do that by texting the word Get Healthy to 33444. Or subscribe on iTunes, and you can stay up to date with everything that we have going on so you don't miss any shows. So this will be a fun show. We're talking with Dr. Gerald Pollack. He is the author of a few books, the most popular of which is called The Fourth Phase of Water, Beyond Solid, Liquid, and Vapor. So that's pretty interesting. He's also the author of a book called Water in the Cell, Phase Transitions in Cell Biology, Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life by Gerald Pollack, Molecules and Muscles, Uncovering the Principles, and he's a founding editor-in-chief of the scientific journal called Water, and is recognized as an international leader in science and engineering, and he's up at the University of Washington, and he's a professor of bioengineering. So thanks so much, Doc, for being on the show today. Dr. Pollack, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that. I think there's a little technical glitch, but Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. No, I'm excited that you were able to make the time on this Memorial Day. You were sharing with me before the show. You got some good plans today, huh?
Oh, we certainly do. Yeah, lovely Memorial Day weekend in Seattle.
Yeah, good.
Nice
good.
place to be. We're actually preparing for the earthquake that's coming. But other than that, it's a wonderful place to live.
Is that what they're saying? An earthquake's supposed to come?
Well, I mean, a few decades ago, it was revealed that we've had earthquakes about really major ones every approximately 300 years, if I recall, and they're not trivial earthquakes. They're magnitude 9.1 or something like that, and it's overdue. So there's been a lot of local talk about it and what we should do to prepare, and where exactly you live and what's the danger. So we have Interstate 5 that runs right through Seattle, and the famous article called The Big One in the New Yorker magazine indicated that, well, if you live west of I-5, you can expect to be swamped by the tsunami that follows. If you live east of that, then you don't have to worry too much about the tsunami, but probably the shaking will and the rubble will do you in. So it's something to look forward to.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I was just reading an article recently about there's a scientist now who's talking about a warning. He says here, a disastrous big one is now imminent in California. And so this scientist is actually, we've sort of been going through this my whole life, talking about the big one that's supposed to hit here in California. But she's really talking about, the imminence of this thing. It's supposed to hit California. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah, it could well be. But, what do we do about it? It's interesting. I was just perusing a book that my daughter just finished reading. It's by a guy whom you might know, Rupert Sheldrake.
Yeah.
And so Rupert and I have become friends, and in one of his books, a book about dogs who know when their owners are returning from work, not because they hear the car pulling up, but because the dogs have a certain sense. And later in the book, he talks about animals who know that the earthquake is imminent and show signs, and one wonders, this seems too remote from conventional science to be supported, but I would think if I were in charge of science and the science establishment, I'd put some money into following this, because the early warnings that are right now that people are talking about give us an extra few seconds to prepare, but this could be days if it works out, and it would seem to me so obvious. It's just that conventional science doesn't really entertain ideas like this that seem so remote from the mainstream that they fall between the cracks. And it's too bad, because it could be a real breakthrough in science to find out exactly how these animals know what's going on. It could save them and save us.
Yeah, there's stories of that tsunami, I think in 2003, that hit Thailand, and I think there's stories of all the animals knowing and running to higher ground. And are you familiar with a guy by the name of Cliff High? He's got some database that he runs, and he sort of does like a Google scan where he sends spiders out and analyzes the words that people are using in social media and in forums and places like that. And he kind of runs that through a database of his own creation, and gets a general census on what people are talking about, what words they're using to describe things, to sort of predict the future. And so he's had apparently a pretty good success rate. But it's interesting, if more and more people start talking about, you mentioned Rupert Sheldrake in the morphogenic field. If more and more people start talking about things, I wonder if that has an impact on what actually happens.
It could well be, and it certainly would fit into his morphic field hypothesis, which he's pursuing right now. By the way, using water, which is supposedly the topic of our conversation. There are some patterns that show up in water when you vibrate the water at particular frequencies, and if you change the frequency just a little bit, you get a different pattern. And he's interested in figuring out whether once you establish a pattern, a particular pattern at a particular vibration frequency, whether the next time you try to establish it, it comes more quickly. And that would fit into his morphic field hypothesis, because the idea being that once something has happened, it's easier for it to happen the second time because the information is somehow there. How it's there is not so clear, but anyway.
Yeah. Did you get started in your career? Was water always a fascination in your work, or did you sort of come into it as an area of interest later on?
At first I thought water was awfully boring. I was a graduate student and in a biomedical engineering department, and by coincidence, this has nothing to do with my current interest in water. The department chair, who's long gone, studied water, and he was studying something called bound water. And to the students who were sitting there and listening to these lectures, most of the students thought it was kind of boring because we couldn't understand why this bound water, water bound to molecules, could be important. And in fact, I remember when I was a graduate student hearing from one of the professors who was loosely involved in the studies of bound water. He said to me once, out of a clear blue sky, and I couldn't understand why he said it, but it somehow stuck. He said, anything you do in your career, and I was ready to go studying muscles, which I studied for 30 years or so, how the molecular mechanism of contraction. He said, whatever you do, don't study water. And I remember it to this day, and it never quite made sense. But now in retrospect, I really understand, because just roughly at the time I was graduating, there was a huge debacle that took place in water research. And this debacle had a profound dampening effect on anybody studying water, and had to do with something called polywater. And maybe you know of it, but I doubt many of your listeners know about this. And it had to do with a Russian finding. There's a prominent Russian physical chemist. Perhaps he was the most prominent Russian physical chemist, and Russia has produced a lot of physical chemists of great repute, and this guy was, you might say, the top. His name is Boris Deryagin, and his name is remembered to this day, but not so much for what he discovered. So he was studying water, and he had an apparatus where he evaporated the water, and then the water, this evaporated so-called presumably pure water, was then condensed inside of very thin glass capillary tubes. And he studied that water that was supposedly pure water that was condensed inside the tubes, and it had properties that were amazing, that were so different from ordinary water. And of course they thought the Russians thought this was pretty interesting, and this never got to the West, because for a while, because the Russian stuff was not translated into English. And then suddenly, during the period of the Cold War, translations began to crop up and disappeared. And the people in the West were astonished by this, because it looked as though there was a different phase or something of water. And water is so common that it appered to be very interesting. So because of the Cold War, and we growing up were there was a lot of propaganda, and we were told that the Russians or the Soviets were cruel, heartless people who couldn't do anything right, and suddenly they came up with a seemingly astonishing finding. And so when it got to the West, people, either the scientists had kind of two choices: either to poo-poo it as nonsense, or to take it up and leapfrog the Russians and find something even more interesting. And so there's one group, the University of Maryland, who began studying this intensely, and they had a lead article in Science, which is one of the top journals, and the title of the piece was Polywater, and poly meaning like a polymer, like water was behaving as though it consisted of a lot of molecules stuck together to form a big molecule, like a big polymer, because that's what these properties seem to indicate.
So what were the magical properties that were found in Russia? And what year was this?
Well, this was the late 60s.
Okay.
I remember because it was just close to my graduation when this faculty member said to all the students, "Stay away from water."
Oh, yeah.
I'll get to the reason in a moment. But the properties were, the freezing temperature of this stuff was way down, and the boiling temperature was way up, and the density was high, and the infrared spectrum of the water differed from ordinary water. So it seemed that whatever properties they measured, they differed from water, and yet there seemed to be water or pure water, because they had evaporated the water, and then the water cooled, and as it cooled, it filled this capillary, and they could actually see in the microscope that there was some strands of something that seemed to grow there, and so it seemed pretty intriguing. And this group at the University of Maryland found a lot of interesting stuff, but other people took a different tack, and they said, "Oh, this can't be real, because we know everything there is to know about water. We know it's got three phases: solid, liquid, and vapor. And this looks like something weird, something different, and yet it seems to be coming out of pure water." So one group repeated their experiment, and they found that when they put the water in the tube, they actually leached some of the silica from the tube itself, and so the water was no longer pure water, but it was like a silica gel. And they said, well, therefore we should pay no attention to the Russian results. And then a lot of people then became highly skeptical, and the nail in the coffin of polywater came from a group, I can't remember, I think they were from Australia. They put salt in the water, and they measured the infrared spectra of the water, and they found that it was pretty similar to the spectra that the Russians found, and so they said, oh, the Russians, they must have been sweating into their water.
Right. It's had to be something, right?
Well, yeah, and so it turned out to be a kind of a experimental debacle and a lot of scientists responded to this, because if even the most prominent Russian physical chemists could screw up so badly by sweating into their water, etc., then the mere mortals like us had better watch out. And it really pushed a lot of people out of water research. Water used to be you might say a hot topic of research before then, because after all, water's everywhere, and you'd like to know the properties of water in order to understand nature and to build technologies and such. But this shoved a lot of people away from even thinking about dipping their foot into the water. It was pretty serious, and that's why this faculty member told all the students, and the boss of the department was studying water. He told all the students, you better stay away from water, because it's dangerous to tread in the water. Yeah. So sorry, that's a long story in deviation, but I started actually studying mussels for 30 years, and 25 or 30 years, and there's a theory of the molecular mechanism of how muscles contract. And we use frontline technology, a lot of which we developed because I had an engineering background. And practically every experiment that we did came out with results that unfortunately failed to fit the theory. And so we knew that there was something really wrong. The problem was that the theory was put forth, and is still a prevailing theory, put forth by a very famous and important Nobel laureate, Sir Andrew Huxley. Mm-hmm. And Sir Andrew is sort of, you might say, the pinnacle of science, Nobel laureate, knighted by the Queen, master of Trinity College, Cambridge, president of the Royal Society. Every conceivable distinction this guy had, and so his theory is really difficult to challenge the king, and his theory still prevails. Although in my view, the evidence against it is so voluminous that we really need to start elsewhere. Of course, we put forth some ideas, but these ideas have not really made a mark, and we came to the feeling that something is really missing from the equation, some term in the equation of muscle contraction, and that is, our muscles are built of proteins, and everybody is thinking about the proteins creating the contraction, but by volume, 2/3 of the muscle is water, just like the rest of our body. And you'd think that ignoring 2/3 of what's in the muscle, which is what the prevailing theory does, it just talks about the proteins, and it ignores the fact that these proteins are bathed in water. You see, so I thought, this really is odd that 2/3 of what's there is being ignored. It's actually more serious than that, because if you actually, we all know that we're roughly 2/3 water, and the fraction decreases with age. We get progressively dehydrated as we get older.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you about that, Doc. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that we get dehydrated as we get older?
That's a good question. I can speculate, but I'm not sure of that. And the speculation has to do with, if you go back to what I started earlier, bound water. But we know so much more about this kind of water now, and it's actually water that sticks to the surface of the protein. And this has been the subject of our work for the last decade or decade and a half. And there's a lot to say about it. But the surface of the macromolecule protein, for example, nucleates. It starts the structure of this kind of. I hate to use the word bound, but it really is bound. But we call it fourth phase water, easy water, and it builds up from that surface. The surface acting as a template, and the template. I think is really a critical feature of these surfaces. In fact, the surfaces that exist in biology, I think the reason they exist is that they can actually serve as a nucleator for the buildup of this kind of water. And as when we're in our pristine state, when we're born, these surfaces just right to build up this kind of water. And I should say this is basically the water that fills our cells and fills us. It's not H2O. It's actually this special water, which I'll talk about if you ask me the questions, because this is our major finding. And so if the surfaces themselves age, because the proteins we produce as we get older are not the pristine proteins with the proper sequence and such. They get mutated with age and are not the same. And these don't have the capacity to build this kind of bound or easy or fourth phase structured water. Then we don't have the water that we need, and we're effectively dehydrated because we've got less of it. And so this is my speculation as to why we have less as we get older. I have no evidence to support that. It's just a speculation.
Just a theory. Yeah. It's interesting. So when we drink water, obviously it matters what kind of water we drink, but let's just say, for example, someone's drinking just tap water out of, some people call it tap liquid, but let's say it's just tap water.
Yeah, because it's more than just water. Yeah.
Yeah. So what does the body create this special fourth phase water from any kind of water that we drink?
Yes. I say yes with qualification, because obviously the water's got a lot of junk in it, and there's a different issue, toxins, pharmaceuticals, whatever. Mm-hmm. But in theory, yes. So we drink the water, and maybe I should go back a step and sort of explain, because we're missing the key part. So what we, and then I'll get back, and please remind me about your question. Does the body create this kind of water from the water we drink? Mm-hmm. So we found in the laboratory at the University of Washington, we found that certain surfaces, and these are hydrophilic surfaces, charged surfaces, surfaces where if you were to drop the water on them, the water would spread out instead of beating up as it does on hydrophobic surfaces like Teflon, for example. So on most surfaces where the water spreads out, we found something astonishing. We found that if we put little particles in the water, they're excluded from the region of water that's right near these surfaces. So and this zone of exclusion could extend, many, even millions of molecular layers. So it's very extensive. And so we called it exclusion zone, because this zone that starts at the surface of the material and goes outward into the water, the zone, it turns out to have properties. We've measured 8 or 9 different properties that differ markedly from ordinary water. So it's different somehow, and this water we think is basically a different phase of water, a fourth phase beyond solid, liquid, and vapor, and because it builds from these charged hydrophilic surfaces, and because our cells are filled with these, our cells basically a matrix of surfaces with not so much space for water. Practically every water molecule inside your cell is within 2 or 3 water molecular layers of one or another surface. The water in our cells is interfacial, and this is just the kind of water that we discovered. And so our cells are just filled with this kind of interfacial or EZ or fourth phase water. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it's not H2O; it's actually H3O2. So a few of its properties are relevant to cell biology and to health and to energy and to so much. So one of them is that this water is charged; it's not neutral, and so you have charged, negatively charged, usually water that's next to the surface of the material surface, and then beyond that are an equal number of positive charges, because the negative and positive are caused by the breaking of water molecules into their negative and positive components, OH minus, H plus. And the OH minuses gather right near the surfaces to create this exclusion zone or fourth phase water with different properties. And the positives gather beyond. They actually are protons that are distributed in the water. So it's like a battery. You have negative, positive, and from this battery, we found in the laboratory that, as you might guess, you can get electrical energy. Mm-hmm. So this is in the body. It's a kind of storage site for energy that the body can use. Now, it's like a charged battery, but in order to get a charged battery, it's like your cell phone battery. Mm-hmm. You need to plug it in, otherwise you don't have any charge. And the same principle applies for this kind of water. In order to build this water and separate the charge and create this battery, you have to have some kind of input energy. And the energy we found, surprisingly, because of an undergraduate student who was doing what he was not supposed to do, it comes from light. And we were rather surprised by this, but it comes all wavelengths of light contribute, but we found that it's mostly not the visible light, but the wavelength just beyond the visible, the infrared light.
Infrared, okay.
Infrared, and infrared builds this, and what that means is that if you, since your body is filled with this stuff, that if you subject yourself to, say, go into an infrared sauna, this is exactly the energy that is needed and used to build up this kind of water, and that may be a reason why you feel better after being in the sauna for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, as I've experienced myself in Finland and Russia and such. And
yeah, we have one of those saunas in our home, and I use it almost every single day.
Well, how do you feel?
I feel amazing, but I often wonder what I'm sweating out. What is that? Is that toxicity? Is that water? What's happening when I'm sweating, I wonder?
Well, of course, when you're sweating, you're losing water. And I can't speak to the toxicity of that, but I would guess that the toxins are included. Other people have studied that. We haven't. But the different perspective that we lend to this is that the infrared energy, the heat, infrared energy that you're absorbing in the body is exactly what you need to convert ordinary water into EZ water or structured water or interfacial water or whatever, fourth phase, whatever you want to call it. And this is, you might say, the new understanding, because in the laboratory we can see very directly. In the laboratory, you add infrared light, and this zone, this exclusion zone, fourth phase, gets bigger, and it can get dramatically bigger. We found an increase of up to 10 times. So getting back to your original question, you drink water, is it converted into fourth phase water? And the answer is absolutely. It's the raw material for buildup of easy water, and easy water is critical to every function in your body because your cells are full of it. Basically, if you boil it down to generic action inside our cells, generic action comes from the folding of proteins. So the protein will go from, say, an unfolded state to a folded state, and depending on a particular cell, for example, a muscle cell, the actin proteins and myosin proteins will undergo some kind of conformational change, some folding, and that gives rise to contraction, some kind of action. But the water is critical because every protein is surrounded by EZ water, and the two are actually one. The EZ water clings so tightly to the protein that it's actually part of the protein. And so the natural state of the protein is the protein plus EZ water. That's what folds. And if the protein doesn't have an adequate complement of EZ water around it, it can't fold naturally, so it will misfold or not fold or whatever. And so your muscle is not working well, or if it's a secretory cell, it's not secreting well. Or if it's a nerve cell in your brain, it's not communicating well, et cetera, et cetera. So what you need to do to get back to function, if this EZ water is in short supply, you need to build it up again. And the simplest way, the most obvious way, is drink more water. You see, and I don't know if you're familiar with the book that was written quite a few years ago about it. The title is called "You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty."
Yeah,
and,
Batman Gellitz, right?
Pardon?
I think it was the Gellitz. I forget his Batman Gellitz.
No, it's Batmangalish is the guy's name, and it starts with Batman and goes on from there, and so we call him Batman.
Yeah, yeah, for lack of a better way of saying it. Yeah,
I mean, and he produced he produced evidence, well, anecdotal evidence, but nevertheless compelling evidence that basically you just drink a lot of water and pretty much whatever it is that ails you will reverse. So he started as a political prisoner. He was an Iranian physician, and he was close to the Shah of Iran, and when the Shah was deposed, his supporters were naturally thrown into prison. They were political prisoners, and he was the one who obviously was responsible for, they all got sick. It's not exactly a vacation place. And they go to him and say, well, hey, doc, what can we do? And all he had at his disposal was water. And so he said, drink a lot of water. And he reports that these people got better just by drinking a lot of water. And then when he got out finally, and I think he delayed his release because he wanted to finish his studies on the prisoners, then he went back into his private practice, and he did the same thing with his patients. So there would come, one patient would have diabetes, and he'd say, well, just drink a lot of water. And there are various other pathologies. I can't remember it sometimes as I read the book, but the bottom line of his story is very simple. Just drink a lot of water and you get better. And we all know, Grandma always would say when you're sick, drink a lot of water. And
right.
Yeah, and so it comes down over the ages that water is really important, and essentially, in my opinion, with this anecdotal evidence and all we've found in the past decade, I would predict that water is the wonder drug of the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. So what's happening when someone drinks water? They're basically getting the building blocks of the raw materials for the body to build this fourth phase water inside the body. So in order to have that energy to do that, you're talking about far infrared. I know in other talks you talk about being outside, full spectrum light, and grounding. These are ways to electrically charge the body so that we can create this fourth phase water?
Absolutely, yeah. Being outside and getting the full spectrum, essentially the sun contains those wavelengths that we need to build easy water. And so, often here in Seattle, where I live, we in the wintertime especially, it's pretty gray and gloomy and cloudy. And when the sun pops out, we all feel good, and we kind of wonder, well, why do we feel good? And we presume it's some kind of subtle psychological issue, but it may be, but it also may be that these wavelengths are coming through, and we absorb them in our body, and as we absorb them, we build our easy water, and so we can feel good because the brain is full of cells, and the brain, like every other kind of cell in our body, needs the easy water to function. Mm-hmm. And if it builds easy water, we can go from, you might say, a kind of morose, depressed state by all the gray and gloom to a state that's the default or the normal state, which is feeling okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's really fascinating being outside and how much that affects the body. I think it affects the body in ways that we don't really know. I think it's, I'm not fully convinced that we even understand, what the body is doing when we eat food. We think we know, and probably the same is true when we drink water or when we go outside. I was just reading a study the other day from the NIH. This is from the NIH, the government funded studies that they've done, and this was in 1992, and it was talking about the ability for someone to spend more time outside and in the direct sunlight decreases cancers by some incredible percentage. And all we hear, I should pull it up. I shared it on our Facebook page. I'll pull it up, but I mean, you're talking about our bodies being exposed to the electrical charge of the sun is causing us to create this fourth phase water. I mean, that's something that we don't, hear all the time.
Well, you don't hear all the time, but I guess I do recommend reading the book because it's all laid out in the book, and the book has become actually extremely popular, and it's there. There are so many things about water that are unusual that we don't know, and they were called anomalies. The scientists called them anomalies because they don't fit the theory, and they're. But on the other hand, if you have a full theory, a correct, a valid theory, then everything should fit. And the number of anomalies, and thinking about three phases that we're all taught, and we think about solid, liquid, vapor. There are too many anomalies, which means something is wrong. and we think what's wrong is the failure to have identified this fourth phase of water. And it's all over the place. And the reason it's all over the place is that the energy that's required to create it, the infrared energy, is all over the place. You can't get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us don't, when we say infrared energy, we don't really realize where it's coming from. We think you look inside the toaster and you see the glowing coils and it's warm, it's heat coming, and we say, oh yeah, that's infrared energy. But in fact, infrared energy is coming from the walls, coming from the sofa, coming from the chairs, coming from you. And if you turn off all the lights and you would to take a photograph, you see nothing because there's no visible light coming from it. But if you take a camera that's an infrared camera that's sensitive to infrared light, then you get a beautiful image, dark or light. It doesn't matter whether there's visible light. The infrared is coming, and it's all over the place. And so so the energy for building this water is always there, and therefore the water is always there, and as I said, we're full of it, but it's also around us. I'm looking at the lake from my home right now, Lake Washington. It's basically it's full of this kind of water because the infrared energy is beating down and creating it.
That's fascinating. So for people that may want to look up that study, it's called The Beneficial Effects of Sun Exposure on Cancer Mortality by the PubMed. And I'll just read the first sentence. It says here, for more than 50 years, there's been documentation in the medical literature suggesting that regular sun exposure is associated with substantial decreases in death rates from certain cancers and a decrease in overall cancer death rate. So this is from 1993. I'll post this on the article page for this particular show if you guys are more interested.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Yeah. I hadn't known about that. That's you know this paper, but I wonder how many people really know that, understand that.
So when you talk about, Doc, infrared, are you talking about far infrared, near infrared? Does it matter, you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, no. We studied wavelengths. The spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, the visible wavelengths are from 400 to 800 nanometers. When we think of light, that's what we think of. But light, from the physicist's point of view, extends way out. And so the infrared wavelengths start at about 800 nanometers and get longer from there. And the distinction between near and far infrared is sort of variable. But I can tell you that we studied wavelengths up to 5 micrometers or so, and we found that 3 micrometers, 3.0, 3.1, is the most effective builder of easy water, and that corresponds to the wavelength, the optical wavelength that water likes to absorb the most. So it turns out the wavelength that water absorbs the most is the wavelength that builds easy water the most, which sort of translates into what the water absorbs in terms of energy from light is then converted in some way. It's not just absorbed and re-radiated. It's converted into a different kind of energy, and that is the separation of charge and creation of easy water.
Sorry. When someone is spending time outside, they're obviously getting exposed to this far infrared. Just infrared light from the sun. How is walking barefoot? Is that the same idea, or are you getting negative ions and a negative charge from the ground, and that's something different that's helping to build this water? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's different, but it's the same endpoint. There are actually many things that you can do to build this kind of water beyond just those two. So most people don't don't know that the Earth has a net negative charge. And I didn't know myself, and I started my career studying electrical engineering. And if somebody had told me, or my professors, as I was a student, that the Earth has we always thought, you plug into ground, and ground is zero, it's neutral. If someone had told me that it's actually negatively charged, I probably would have died of a heart attack because. About 10 years ago, there was a Russian guy in my lab, and just as he was departing to go to the airport to return to Russia after 6 months in my lab, he was telling me something about the Earth's electric field. And I said, Andre, you must be talking about the magnetic field. He said, no, electric field. I said, what are you talking about? I never heard such a thing. Well, everybody knows, he says, that the Earth is negatively charged and the ionosphere is positively charged, so you have something like a capacitor with an electric field whose field lines run perpendicular to the surface of the Earth. I said, Andre, you're crazy. He said, no, you're crazy. And next day, one of my students brings to me the lectures of Richard Feynman, the great physicist, the Einstein of the last half of the 20th century, and there's 3 volumes, and every graduate student in physics reads these volumes, and he opens up to Volume 2, Chapter 9, and it talks about the negative charge of the Earth and the Earth's electric field. And, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I couldn't believe this. And it turns out he presents some of the evidence for this. And as of when he was giving these lectures in the 1950s and 60s or so, everybody knew that the Earth was negatively charged. And still, in Russia, every middle school student learns that. But in the U.S., nobody's ever heard of it. See, so it's not that it's controversial, it's just that it's forgotten. But it's critically important because if you go walk on the beach without your shoes, you're connecting yourself to basically a practically infinite supply of negative charge. And so what happens is these negative charges seep into your body, and the easy water is negatively charged, ordinary water is neutral. So if you take ordinary water, you add negative charge, it converts to easy water. So this is another way to build easy water, is walk on the beach barefoot. Or I remember as a kid growing up in New York City, and the beach, we all went there in the summertime, lots of beach. I remember getting buried in the sand up to my neck. And I don't remember too much from those years, but I remember the distinct, pleasurable feeling of being buried up to my neck in the sand. It was so pleasurable that I remember it to this day. Of course, I had no idea what was going on, but now I understand, because you're essentially immersing yourself, your whole body, not just the bottoms of your feet, into essentially a pool of negative charge, and you're absorbing this negative charge. It builds easy water all over your body, including your brain, and so why shouldn't you feel good?
Yeah, it's kind of like
that's what happened.
It's actually kind of like being in the ocean as well, because you're submerged below the surface of the Earth, actually. So.
Indeed, and I think a lot of people feel pretty good when they're swimming in the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing feeling, yeah. So, Doc, what are your thoughts? We only have a few minutes, or maybe about 15 minutes left, but what are your thoughts in terms of, we're just talking about negative and positive charge, and this fourth phase water is negative charge, and so what are your thoughts about acid alkaline water? There's a lot of debate going on about that. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'll give you my thoughts. However, I've got to say that my thoughts are virtually irrelevant, because I think what matters mostly is clinical tests, and these need to be done, desperately need. I get calls and emails practically every day. What kind of water should I drink?
Yeah.
And the answer, the standard answer that I give is, I don't know. I can give you some theories and expectations, but the only way to really test and see is to do the adequate studies, and we actually like to do them, but it's in order to do these studies, you need personnel and supplies and equipment. And to get the money to do that, it's pretty substantial. We're talking an adequate study is a few $1 million, and we've tried to get it from the government, from government sources, which have actually been pretty good to our research up to recently. But the idea of putting money into water and figuring out what water to drink, that's beyond anything that the scientific reviewers at NIH think is really useful or important.
You can't make a lot of money on that. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, there's so many different types of water too. There's ionized water, structured water, acid, alkaline water. There's spring water. There's well water. I mean, there's the different pHs of water. I mean, it's so complex, isn't it?
This needs to be studied. It's critically important. There seems to be no problem supporting clinical tests on drugs of various sorts, but not on water, which is sort of the most obvious thing to study. But I do have a few things about alkaline water. So the first is that it's got negative charge. Basically, it's produced by machines, and the machines have two platinum electrodes, one positive, one negative, and the water is split to pass through those two electrodes, and one fraction of the water has this negative charge, and the other fraction has positive charge. And the positive charged water is low pH water, and if you taste it, you spit it out immediately. It's awful, but it's good for killing bacteria. And the negatively charged water has high pH, and that's the water that many think is good for drinking. And so the question is it really good? And I know there have been some arguments back and forth. My Japanese friend who studied this for many years told me a story about the Japanese government. It all started. This water started in Japan. It's called Kangen water.
Oh, right.
And it's not the name of a company, but it's the name of a type of water. And in Japan, many families, a really large fraction of families, have a machine that produces that. And this happened after the Japanese government, this is my understanding from my colleague, did clinical tests of this water. And the clinical tests, he told me, were so extremely positive that right now, if you are living in Japan and you have any kind of gastrointestinal issue from your mouth to your rear end, anywhere, the first thing they do is they put you on this water. And they pay for it. The government pays for it. You see, so governments don't pay for something, and so that's on the positive side. And I've heard some of the negative side is that it passes through your stomach. The stomach has low pH, and therefore it must neutralize this kind of water. So even if you think it might be good for your health, it won't work because of this. And of course, the argument is cogent. However, it depends. I could imagine it depends how much you drink, because if this negatively charged water is EZ water, which it might be because EZ water has negative charge, it takes time for it to neutralize. And if you drink a large bolus of this water, the amount of time it spends in your stomach may be limited, and much of it may actually pass through, or the charge from the negatively charged water could be transferred to your body even before it gets to the stomach, because charge moves pretty quickly. So the argument, as I said, I think is cogent, but needs to be evaluated the extent to which it really applies. And I don't know the answer because the studies haven't been done, except, as I mentioned, the clinical studies seem to be supportive. Sometimes the theory says it can't work, but in fact it seems to work in many other realms. And so either everyone's lying or there's something wrong with the theory.
Yeah, right.
So go ahead.
What are your thoughts about the work of Masaru Dr. Emoto and his structured water and holding memory? Do you buy into that? Well,
whether I buy into that is really irrelevant. The question is whether it's true or not what's my opinion. But I do have some things to say about it. So Emoto died, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and I shared an interview with him once, he the spiritualist and me the scientist, and I actually wanted to meet him, and he wanted to meet me, and he was invited to come to dinner at my home. Unfortunately, he didn't make it, and he had a good excuse. He died, and so, but I guess most of your listeners may know that he produces frozen crystals of water, and they can be beautiful or ugly depending on the kind of spiritual or other input that they get. And he's tried it also with music. If he plays a Bach cantata, then he gets beautiful crystals, and if he plays hard rock, he gets ugly crystals, and etc. So, and the Emoto people have invited me, and I spent 2 days lecturing in Japan to people who are interested in that sort of thing. And so the question is this real or is this not real? The first that I should tell you is that there's a lot of evidence that water can store information. In fact, we have a grant right now in which we're studying that very thing, and it's the EZ water that's crystalline that I think has the capacity to store information. So what I present when I go there is the following. I don't know whether Emoto's stuff is right or not right, but I do know the underlying science, and that is that if you take water and you attempt to freeze the water, of course you can, but in order to freeze it, you must go through this EZ phase, and the EZ phase then converts into ice. And if you melt ice, you go from ice to EZ water to ordinary water. That sequence is obligatory. That's what we found in the book, and it explains this. So when you're freezing the water, if you're in the EZ stage is ordered crystalline kind of phase of water, and crystals can store information. You see, and so there is a possibility, a scientific possibility, that information which may come from infrared energy that your body is generating, that information is possibly stored in the EZ water, and when the EZ water converts to ice, it's manifested in certain ways. So I guess the bottom line is that I don't know whether his results are accurate, correct, or not, but I do know that the underlying physical basis for that is in place, and so it could well be correct.
Well, they've done certain studies, haven't they? Or they're actually using water molecules in computers to store information. I mean, this is all being done, right? Water molecules in computers to store information. I think that's the future. I haven't heard that it's been done. I would like to hear if it's been done. I've read some things about it in the last couple of years. I should try to see if I can find those articles again. But it's just really fascinating, because if water's holding information, then what's going on with those images that he took. It's really fascinating when you read that book. And for people that are interested, it's called I think it's called The Hidden Messages in Water. Is that right? Yeah. Hidden message in or from, or I don't remember, something like that. There are various books that have come out on that subject, and his work is continuing. There are some very dedicated people who I know quite well who are leading the effort, and the effort is organized toward peace in the world, and this is a really sincere effort and peace through the vehicle of water and understanding water. Now, what role do you think juicing and getting water from fruits and vegetables plays in our health, do you think? Very important role. So when you're juicing, you're squeezing out the liquid from the plants, especially from green plants. So what is that liquid? It's a liquid from inside the cells of plants. And as I mentioned, insides of cells, whether it's animals or plants, whatever, contain EZ water, mostly EZ water. And we've confirmed in some plants that it is indeed EZ water. So what you're doing is you're drinking the juice from the cells of plants and therefore replenishing what you need inside your cells for proper function.
And that's why, I've met with many integrative or complementary alternative physicians, and a large fraction of them, they when a patient comes complaining of a particular malady or disease or whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. For many of these people, the first thing they tell the patient to do is to juice, and the reports from these people pretty consistently are, 6 months later, patient comes back and their symptoms have largely abated. They've lost weight and they feel better. Mm-hmm. And so this is anecdotal. I don't know of any evidence in peer-reviewed journals, but it might be there. I don't claim to read all the journal articles that are there. But I remember so distinctly speaking to these people and these people explaining how powerful it is. Essentially, you're just rebuilding your easy water that's missing from your cells by doing that, and therefore restoring your health.
Yeah. So some of the things people, sort of action steps or items that people can take from this show would be to get out in the sun more and to expose yourself either to a sauna therapy or getting out in the sun and exposing yourself to infrared light, as well as grounding yourself, obviously drinking more water, and also juicing too, right?
Yeah, and there are a number of substances also that you can take that we've been studying some of these that have been known for centuries to be good for health. Turmeric is an example. Used in India and Ayurvedic from way back, and so we tested turmeric in the laboratory among other substances, coconut water, for example, another one, and these substances build easy water. You just put a little bit in the water, easy grows. And so we think that the underlying basis for the efficacy of these substances lies in their ability to build easy water. It's true of aspirin too. We found the same, that aspirin is good for so many things. It's a natural substance from the bark of willow trees, and it has so many positive effects on us. It gets rid of our headache, it reduces swelling, it reduces pain, it reduces fever, prevents blood clots. Good for cancer. It's been reported breast cancer 2-3 years ago. There's a report that people dying of breast cancer, if they have one aspirin a day, death rate is reduced by, I think, 50%, and is just generally good and heart too. And the question is, how is it possible that one substance like aspirin could have so many diverse positive effects?
Right.
And so if you start thinking through the logic of this, either somehow there are receptors in every one of these, or somehow, or it could affect a substance that's common to all of these areas. And that substance would be water, because water is everywhere. And sure enough, we found that aspirin builds easy water, you see. And so I think it's possible that the efficacy of aspirin, and by the way, we tried, I think it was Tylenol, I can't remember which one, aspirin-like, and with similar effects. So it may be that the efficacy of many of these substances that have been known for a long time to be good for health lies in their ability to build easy water. So that's yet another way to improve health and perhaps reverse pathology.
Yeah, it's so.
That's why I said, it might be that water easy water especially, turns out to be the wonder drug of the 21st century.
Yeah, it's fascinating. One final question before we go. I know there's the standard ideas out there in terms of how much water should people be drinking. Obviously, it depends on what kind as well, but generally, what are your thoughts about the amount of water people should drink?
I wish I could end on a definitive note, and the answer is I don't know.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, isn't it? All this stuff, this information about water and health and what the water is doing inside the body and what far infrared light or infrared light is doing on the body and the grounding. It feels like, there's so much great information coming out these days, but on the flip side of that, it's fascinating that it seems as if we know less than 1% of what's actually going on. It's amazing.
Oh yeah, there is so much that's unknown.
Yeah.
Biological scientists, I interview many of them and ask them, how much of what the fundamental knowledge is possible to know, how much do we know? And I was kind of surprised because I asked this question of, in my university in a cafeteria where there are a lot of people, researchers sitting, and many of the medical scientists would say, like 70, 60%, 80%, and other people say much less than 1%.
Wow.
And I'm in the latter category. I think there's so much that we don't understand, but with this information that's coming in on water, I think it's possible to take a lot of findings and bring them together funnel them into one least common denominator, and that least common denominator has been ignored for so long, and I think that's water. And many people studying biology think that water is just a background carrier of the more important molecules of life. And in the two books that you mentioned, I argue, especially the fourth phase of water and cells, gels, the engines of life, that's so wrong, and that water is central to our very existence and to practically every function of our cells and our body. Water is really there. Yeah. So, very important.
So important. Well, Doc, thanks for spending a little bit of your Memorial Day with us. I appreciate that.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been great, Justin. Thank you for your perceptive questions.
Well, thank you. Hang on the line there really quickly. We're just going to close out the live show, or the recorded show. Thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to put some of the links to the books that we mentioned, as well as the book, The Fourth Phase of Water, obviously, and we'll link over to Dr. Pollack's website. So if you want to check out this show page on our website so you can get those links to the different studies, I'll put that study that we mentioned during the show. I'll put that on this show, as well as if you want to visit any of the sponsors. Just remember 526. So if you go to extremehealthradio.com/526, we'll put links to all that stuff there. So thank you guys for joining us. We love you. Thank you for all your support over the years, over 500 shows. We really appreciate it. You guys are amazing. Thanks for passing on our shows, and make sure to check out The Fourth Phase of Water too, Beyond Solid, Liquid, and Vapor. So we'll put a link to that. Hope you guys had a great Memorial Day, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. I have been a huge fan of rebounding for many, many years, and if you want to get in great cardiovascular shape, tone your legs, back, and butt, and stomach, as well as cleanse your lymphatic system from toxins and chemicals, you just have to start rebounding. It's imperative. And not only will it create endorphins that quickly become addictive to you, but it's very low impact as well. It helps to prevent sicknesses and diseases, as well as increase bone density, and it flushes toxins from your lymphatic system. It's amazing. And not only that, but it's a ton of fun also. I do it every single day for about 15 minutes. And we found the best rebounder on the market today in the world, bar none. It's called the Bellicon Rebounder. It's the Rolls-Royce of rebounders, in my opinion. And let's listen to some of what our guests have had to say about rebounding. Robert von Sarbacher is a health researcher and creator of the Mini Beat Protocol. And Robert, what's your favorite exercise?
In general, probably one of the number one anti-aging exercises on the planet is rebounding. So 15 minutes a day is good for that. You can find people who have had thermography scans on cancers, giant tumors, and when they're doing a rebounder, it would start spewing out and shrinking right in front of your eyes, the tumor would, as they're on the rebounder. So it's really good for that sort of thing. It's also very good for exercising internal organs. It's the only internal organ exerciser that I know of known to man.
Dr. Lindsay Duncan is the CEO and founder of Genesis Today. And what's the best way that you think of to stimulate the lymphatic system of the body?
Rebounding is incredible because it's good for the lymphatic system, and there's more lymph fluid in the body than there is blood. And the quickest way and the most effective way to get the lymphatic system flowing is through rebounding itself.
Yeah, because the lymphatic system can't really detox itself, can it? I think you
know. No, the heart, we have the heart, thank you, for pumping blood. And we don't have a heart to pump lymphatic fluid. The only thing that really can pump lymphatic fluid is cardiovascular exercise utilizing the thighs, the thigh muscles. And that's why rebounding and getting a burn in that thigh muscle is so important for the flow and the stimulation of the lymphatic fluid.
Wow, and they even put cancer patients on rebounding, don't they?
Nutritionists do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but not a conventional doctor. But yeah, I've been learning about rebounding lately. It's quite an amazing thing.
Yeah, rebounding's amazing.
Health researcher and author of Cancer Step Outside the Box, Ty Bollinger. What do you do in your life to prevent cancer?
What do you do to treat cancer? What do you do to prevent it? Rebounding is something that I try to do on a daily basis. A little mini trampoline for those people that aren't familiar with the term rebounding, but it's basically just jumping up and down on that little mini tramp. What that does is it stimulates the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system is one of our primary detoxification systems in our body, and most folks don't stimulate their lymph flow, and so the toxicity in their body builds up because their lymph is not stimulated, and the up-down motion on a rebounder stimulates the lymph flow better than just about any other exercise. So I do that almost on a daily, probably 5 days a week. I would say I average doing that.
And finally, author and speaker and creator of the Longevity Now program, David Wolf. Do you think the Bellicon is the best rebounder on the market today?
Absolutely. I was just with the crew in Europe that does the Bellicon rebounder, which is an incredible rebounder. My God, what a machine. And it doesn't use metal springs. It uses like flexi ropes. So it's very soft and fun, and it's just great to play with.
Well, there you have it. The up and down G-force actually stimulates every single cell in your body. It's incredible. And as someone who works out in the gym a lot and does Qigong, I think that the best physical aerobic exercise, in my opinion, is rebounding. It's just absolutely incredible for the human body. And the Bellicon is silent, and it comes with a warranty, and you can get them in several different sizes and colors, and some of them have bars that you can hold on to in case you're worried about balance. It's a well worth it investment in your health and in your future. So check them out in our store if you'd like, or you can check out the videos on extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. Again, that's extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. That's B as in boy, ELLICON. Okay, there you go. Episode 526. Wrap up. Is that correct? Let me make sure I got that right. Yeah, I just wrapped up the show with him off the air. What a fascinating guy. You know what I didn't ask him about? I wish I would have asked him about is Ormus. I'm not sure if he's looked into Ormus, but if you guys are unfamiliar with Ormus, we did a show. Let me make sure. Let me pull up the show notes to that. Actually, let me make I just do Extreme Health Radio space into my Google search and do Ormus. We talked about Ormus on episode 411 with Ken Rolla, but then we also talked about, we haven't really done an in-depth show on Ormus except for episode number 15, which was October of 2012. That's crazy. Yeah, so Ormus, from what I understand, it's the precursor to minerals, I think, and you can create Ormus that actually, it'll levitate and it will bilocate and it will escape being inside of a glass container that's completely sealed and shut. It's got some magical qualities. If you're interested in this unique substance called Ormus, check out episode 411 or episode 15. You know what? I'll put links to those in the show page too. How about that? We don't normally do show notes, but I feel like those are important shows to listen to. So hope you guys enjoyed that show. I thought it was interesting being exposed to the far infrared. I keep saying far infrared energy. And, we did a show a while back with Dr. Jack Cruz, and we're going to have him on again. He's a fascinating individual, but he talks a lot about light, red light, blue light, EMF, and he talks a lot about electricity and energy and being connected to the earth and grounded. It's so interesting. So, really, like all this stuff is just getting back to nature, right? It's getting back to how we're supposed to be living. It's so simple, isn't it? It's just so simple. We're supposed to be outside in the sun with no sunscreen on, no sunglasses, on the bare foot, on bare feet. That's how we were when we were kids, right? And all of a sudden we wonder why we're sicker than we ever were, when we're, wearing rubber-soled shoes, not drinking water, inside exposed to, blue light and looking at computer screens with bad posture and, smoking and doing all these things that are completely disconnected from the earth. and we wonder why. So it's interesting. I mean, it's so simple too, right? A lot of these principles: drink more water, drink more green juice, go outside. I mean, all these things are so simple. So fascinating guy, Dr. Gerald Pollack. I was just talking to him off the air. What a really great guy. His book, The Fourth Phase of Water, Beyond Solid, Liquid, and Vapor. And I wanted to ask him too, is the fourth phase, is it like a gel? Because that was the title of one of his other books, Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life by Gerald Pollack. So fascinating. Water's so fascinating. And I'm with him. I don't think we have the first clue of what water is or what it does. I don't think we have the first clue in terms of understanding what food does to our cells. I don't think we have the first clue in terms of understanding how light works in our body. But we don't need to know all that in order to get back to nature, right? And start living a more natural lifestyle. So that's what we're all about here. I want to let you know that this show is brought to you by our academy, and that's an academy that we're going to be starting in September. And the academy is a way for us to apply these practical principles into our life. And we're going to be doing courses on every organ in the body, every system of the body: liver, gallbladder, heart, lungs, colon, thyroid, brain, nervous system. We're going to be doing seeking out experts in these fields to really help us dive deep into these particular organs of the body. And we're also going to be doing courses on health ailments too. So if you guys are dealing with something like Lyme disease or cancer or heart disease or digestive issues, we're going to be doing in-depth courses on how to heal this stuff and exactly what to do to get over this stuff. So I'm super pumped. I'm excited about this. We're also going to be doing Q&As where we take your health questions and we categorize them up by alphabetical order. So you can go through the alphabet and look up any condition and get multiple doctors' takes on a particular ailment, like maybe gastritis or tendinitis or something like that, where you can get a handful of different people talking about how to reverse these things. So we're also going to be doing Q&A calls, like I just said, webinars. We're going to be doing, there's going to be a forum in there. It's going to be the place to actually practically apply a lot of the theory and the why information that we have at Extreme Health Radio. So this isn't for everybody. This is going to be a paid membership site. And I'm super excited about it because this is something that I wanted to create for me. So it's going to be a paid membership site, and it's only going to be for those that are wanting to take their health to the next level. Another thing we're going to be doing in there too is yearly seasonal cleanses overseen by a doctor. So we're going to, each time the season changes, we're going to get into doing a cleanse and a particular type of cleanse, and we'll do it as a group. And so it's going to be really cool. It's really, really exciting, and it's going to be a place for all of us to meet together because we get emails from so many interesting people that I think need to know who each other are. And so it's going to be a great way for us to all connect together. So I'm really excited about it. So I'll put a link to the Academy, which won't be launching until September. Right now, that's a soft launch date, sometime in September of 2017. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that as well. So you can check out that and learn more about it if you're interested. Thank you guys for your support on Amazon. We really appreciate you supporting us. Thank you for your support in our store and checking out all of the new products that we have in our store. We're adding new products all the time. Unique, very, very unique health items in our store, like PEMF machines, juicers, saunas, rebounders, all kinds of energy medicine, Qigong courses, all kinds of really cool stuff in our store. So thanks for your support and checking that out, because without your support there and through Amazon and through your donations on Patreon, we couldn't do the show. So this is our full-time thing, and we're really excited about helping you more, so your support helps us do that. So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing our shows. We love you, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on